Chapter 175 Clear Void Sect. After he clearly saw the two people's appearances, Han Li inwardly sighed. They were unexpectedly the same as him, disciples who have cultivated to the 11th layer. One appeared old, but his eyes showed a trace of cunning. The other appeared honest and naive. It was clear that he was an inexperienced youngster. This strange pair had sought him, causing Han Li to truly feel a bit surprised. However, Han Li faintly guessed their purpose in coming after some slight thought. Is there something on these senior martial brothers' minds? Han Li coldly asked from courtesy. But he used an unintimate tone, undoubtedly revealing his attempt to have them retreat from an awkward situation. Clearly, this senior martial brother Xiang's face was far thicker than Han Li imagined. Not only did he not mind Han Li's 1,000 miles distant tone, but actually used a familiar and enthusiastic tone. Does junior martial brother Han have a good plan for tomorrow's trip to the Forbidden Area? Our magic power is quite meager. It's quite possible that we will be the first to fall in a fiery melee with the other sects. Wouldn't it be better for us to negotiate and think of a countermeasure? When Han Li heard this, he blinked his eyes several times and didn't speak. Nevertheless, he was completely certain of the other party's intentions. Their words were pretty close to his own guesses. It seemed this old schemer planned to rope in a few disciples with feeble magic power and have them move and fight together, increasing security by much as well as greatly increasing their odds of survival. However, Han Li clearly understood that this action came with both advantages and disadvantages. If people were to concentrate in one place, the area they could search would be considerably less, greatly decreasing the amount of spiritual medicines they could find. As for how the spiritual medicines would be distributed in the end, that was also hard to say. It would probably be decided by strength. Han Li naturally hadn't the slightest interest in an alliance. Not only would there be no advantages, but he was also more than likely to be used as cannon fodder. As for this old schemer, he probably held no good intentions and was certain to take advantage of a crisis for personal gain by resorting to self-serving manipulations. The old man saw that Han Li remained speechless after he finished speaking. He couldn't help but feel anxious, so he flusteredly said, "I actually have an idea." Perhaps junior martial disciple has heard these words before, but this idea will absolutely ensure that everyone survives safely through the trip. The old man put up a profoundly mysterious expression and squeezed the wrinkles on his forehead for a moment. Han Li found his appearance to be quite humorous. The yellow-haired youngster next to him seemed to greatly admire this old schemer. Although he didn't say anything, he exposed an expectant expression towards the old man. Since he absolutely wasn't going to join their alliance, Han Li was unwilling to be tangled any further and bluntly rejected, "I am sorry. My humble self is not accustomed to working with others. I also do not intend to do so this time as well. If senior martial brother wishes to join hands with others, then it would best to look for other junior martial brothers." Han Li spoke very straightforwardly and incisively. Han Li knew that only by clearly showing that he wasn't an inexperienced novice would he able to make the other party give up and not continue to tangle with him. Otherwise, if this senior martial brother Xiang felt there was the slightest chance to convince his fellow sect member, he would mostly likely continue to pester him. Han Li did not want to be bothered by this person. When old man Xiang heard this, he realized he sought the wrong target. Although the person before him seemed quite young, his words were practiced and careful. He was clearly an experienced person who had passed through trials and hardships. The old man spoke no more rubbish and took his leave with a slightly angry appearance. Han Li saw them head in the direction of another disciple who was currently meditating on top of a rock. Han Li faintly smiled and turned his body back, continuing to observe the several noteworthy fellow sect members. However, this time he saw junior martial sister Chen and a woman of a common appearance standing next to her. There were a few talented and handsome men faintly gathering nearby. The corner of Han Li's mouth moved several times. Although he did not know why, he felt unfavorably towards those few men. He finally decided that what was out of sight was out of mind, and looked for an uninhabited area to close his eyes and rest. Like that, the next morning had arrived. All of the disciples arrived at the mountain peak once more and stood in orderly rows, waiting for the arrival of the other immortal sects. After waiting for several hours, they had yet to see a single person, causing Han Li to inwardly rain endless curses. He almost suspected that the other sects were doing this deliberately as to consume the physical strength of everyone from Yellow Maple Valley. However, what caused Han Li to feel even more distraught was that, as chance had it, Junior Martial Sister Chen had been assigned to stand to his right. With the familiar scent of her body occasionally entering his nostrils, his imagination was somewhat let loose as if he was returning to that extremely alluring night. In order to cover up the oddities from his face, with no better option left, Han Li lowered his head and feigned the appearance of great unease. However, his heart was filled with great and unending complaints. She was a pretty woman, but could her beauty go as far as for him to lose his self-control? However, this martial ancestor Li whom Han Li greatly admired stood at the very front. He stood with his face to the sky and was able to stand in such a manner for an unexpectedly long amount of time. It was unknown whether or not he went on a mental journey or if he was pondering about something. Suddenly, Han Li felt a disturbance in his surroundings. It seemed that something happened. He could not help but raise his head. His fellow sect members all looked up toward the sky without exception and looked toward the horizon. Han Li also followed their gazes. He saw that there were several star-like twinkling streaks of light in the deep blue sky, gradually growing larger. A short moment later, a series of black dots also appeared. Underneath the black dots, the silver lights flashed. It seemed the black dots were riding the streaks of starlight across the sky. Seeing this marvel, everyone became even more restless. Quiet. What kind of children are you? This is the Clear Void Sect's flying magic tool, the Rainbow Snow Soap. Do not make a fuss and lose face for our Yellow Maple Valley. A short and stout middle-aged steward turned his head to give several reprimanding words with a dark complexion. Those words were quite effective. The restlessness was immediately settled, and after that, there were only occasional whispers. At this moment, the black dots already became clear. Each of them was a cultivator wearing gray Taoist robes. The majority of them were true Taoist priests, each holding a horsetail whisk with their hair tied up into a bun. However, those who did not wear Taoist robes appeared to be mortals, as if they were sheltered children who had yet to leave home. Han Li and the others clearly saw that the stars beneath their feet were actually a stiff white rainbow bridge covered with dazzling specks of silver white light. It was unknown how the specks of light were embedded within the object. As Han Li carefully watched the scene, the white rainbow bridge carrying the Clear Void Sect's members descended onto the mountain and landed across from the members of Yellow Maple Valley. Their leader, a middle-aged Taoist priest, lightly moved his hand, and the white light flashed. The Rainbow Snow Soap's rainbow bridges disappeared, and in his hand appeared a brocade object. I didn't think that Benefactor Li would be leading this time. This humble Taoist Fu Yunzi greets you. This Taoist priest walked several steps to the front of martial ancestor Li and spoke with radiant happiness. From his tone, it seemed they were acquaintances. Humph. If this old facetious Taoist could come, then why couldn't I come? Martial ancestor Li bluntly said with both hands behind his back. Within each sect, we've entered core formation the latest. If we didn't do these errands, who would? The Taoist priest didn't mind in the least, and he swung his horsetail whisk with a constant smile. This old facetious Taoist is wily and cunning. Last time, you brought suffering upon me. Don't think you will get the chance to do so again. What is Benefactor Li talking about? Recognizing lost bets is a right and proper matter. Who was possibly wronged? The Taoist priest laughed. When martial ancestor Li heard this, a cold light flashed through his eyes. It seemed that he was about to be angry, but he immediately thought of something and stepped down with grandeur, unwillingly saying, After that chunk of iron essence was refined into your great azure sword, its power greatly increased. This Li spent 10 years purifying it but nonetheless had to cheaply give it away to this old facetious Taoist. His words contained great grievances. It was clear he felt much heartache over that iron essence. So it turns out that the renowned immortal Master Li actually cared so much about a mere piece of iron essence. Fine, this time I will produce another item, one definitely greater than that iron essence. If you win this bet, you will be able to make up for your previous loss. The Taoist priest said with a smile as he twirled his beard.